Namaste, Sat Shri Akal, and a very good day to you all. I'm your host, Jay Bansal. I serve as the Vice President of Education for Vishwa Hindu Parishad, America. Today I'm joined by my colleague, Shri Amitabh Mittalji. He's the General Secretary of VHPA. He is joining us from Chicago. Today we're going to look at a deeply ingrained tendency among many Western scholars when it comes to describing and interpreting Hindu deities. However, before I properly frame that conversation, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to our panelist for this webinar, Dr. Mona Lisa Behera. Namaste, and a warm welcome to you, Mona Lisa ji. Dr. Behera is an art historian and a curator, currently serving as assistant professor of art history at the Sumaya School of Civilizational Studies in Mumbai. She teaches courses on visual and material culture, Indian art history from the pre-modern to the contemporary, aesthetics and cultural studies. Dr. Behera earned her PhD in visual studies from the School of Arts and Aesthetics at JNU in Delhi. She held visiting doctoral fellowships at University College Dublin and the Chester Beatty Library in Dublin as well. Her research explores the intersections of ritual practice, iconography, and architecture with a particular focus on the visual and material cultures of the feminine divine form in ancient and medieval Bharat. She is especially interested in how sacred images and spaces mediate religious experiences and articulate structures of power. So, real pleasure to have you. And once again, a very warm welcome. Now, a little bit about the topic itself. So, for a long time, Hindu deity murtis have not been simply misunderstood in the West. In fact, they have been viewed through frameworks that were never meant to actually understand them. From the colonial period onwards, Western observers brought with them religious assumptions, cultural hierarchies, and moral expectations that shaped how Hindu sacred imagery was judged. Colonial writers like James Mill dismissed Hindu religious art as irrational and morally inferior, while missionaries such as Du Bois described Hindu deities as grotesque or obscene, often without engaging with their symbolic or ritual meanings. But the more lasting damage came from so called sympathetic scholars. Max Muller supposedly admired Vedantic philosophy, yet framed Hindu deities as primitive nature gods and treated Murti worship at a lower stage of religion. Monier Williams studied Hinduism deeply, but still described image worship as superstition in need of reform. Even philosophers like Paul Deussen, who respected Vedanta, quietly sidelined temples, icons, and lived devotion intellectually inferior. These produced a powerful pattern. Texts were praised, but living Hindu practices were diminished. Abstraction was respected, but sacred images were spoken about with disdain. Fierce deities such as Shiva or Kali were especially vulnerable. Through Christian moral dualism, destruction was read as evil, power as violence, and feminine divinity as unsettling. What is striking is that this pattern continues today. Indologists like Wendy Doninger continue to sexualize Hindu deities, flattening sacred forms into metaphors or provocations. Seen together, this looks less like misunderstanding and more like a persistent Western fixation, almost a pathology. To unpack this issue with clarity and care, We are joined today by Dr. Mona Lisa Behera, whose work brings historical depth and visual insights into Hindu deities and sacred spaces. Thank you, Dr. Behera, again, and we will begin with our questions. Before I start with the questions that I've tried to frame this conversation with, do you want
Mhm.
to make a statement just to kind of initiate the conversation?
I fully agree with the introduction that you gave, and I do feel that the misrepresentations that we see even till today, they are not innocent mistakes or misunderstandings. They are deliberate, and earlier it was colonial interpretation. Now it's a little more subtle, but it still continues. And yes, I'm happy to unpack this pathology, as you call it, in a more structured way. So
Thank you.
yes, thank you.
Okay, wonderful. So let's start with the very foundation. As I said in my introduction, early European travelers and missionaries often described Hindu deities with terms
Mhm,
like monstrous, grotesque, or demonic. Um,
mhm.
how do you think these cultural biases, how do you think they took place? And do you think these reactions were sincere misunderstanding or deliberate tools of cultural domination?
I would say it is a mix of both. When we are talking about early European descriptions, yes, there is misunderstanding. There is an aesthetic shock, but these were over time used as deliberate strategies of domination. Remember, these are things which were reinforced again and again and again, and it is not as innocent as we would like to believe. It is not merely just misunderstanding. For example, when you use the words monstrous, grotesque, demonic, these are the words which have actually been used for Hindu deities. So we must see where it is emerging from. So in Christian iconography, so this lens of interpretation is basically emerging from Christian iconography, where anything which is not natural, where the human form is not again natural, so it is not divine. It is a moral corruption. It could be it could be a demonic presence. So anything which, according to Christian iconography or Christian iconographic lens of interpretation, is slightly distorted or a hybrid form, becomes demonic, becomes something which one must be afraid of, which is morally corrupt, degenerate, which is why you have these words like grotesque, demonic, monstrous. The kind of episodes which we hear in these early European descriptions, the kind of exaggerations, there's it feels as if these people, they started believing their own lies. For instance, there's a description of a Portuguese missionary priest, and he goes to the coast of Kerala, where he talks about this king who's the ruler who's ruling at that point of time, and he talks about him that though he's an intelligent man, the king is an intelligent man, but he still worships these demonic forces. And there's talk of sacrifices, how 14 virgins are sacrificed at the altar, and how there is bloodlust. And it, and nowhere in Indian history have we come across such kind of an episode. It is only in these European descriptions where we have these really fantastic characters being paraded as Hindu gods and goddesses. So anything which they don't understand, or through their lens doesn't qualify as normal or natural, becomes monstrous. And that equals to signified evil. So they are demons. It is again, they don't understand the symbolism, but rather it becomes monstrous, which becomes equal to diabolical. So it feels like theological reflex. Yes, there is that misunderstanding, but it keeps perpetuating. But it's not like they are not, they do not try to understand. And then that becomes a problem. So there is a deep anxiety about Hindu temples and icons and the kind of worship these gods and goddesses accrue, and again because it is coming from a very Christian understanding. So that's why these gods are not deemed as gods. I mean, they cannot be divine, because simply in Christian understanding, how can gods who accrue such kind of worship, who look like this, who appear like this, how can they even be gods? They are evil, they are monsters, they are something who must be done away with. And people, so there has to be some kind of a mental or intellectual sanitization that needs to happen.
Mm, mm, mm. Interesting. So this is really a reflection of the perspective that it's my perspective is the only right perspective, and everything else must
Exactly.
be, if it doesn't fit that framework, it must be wrong.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah. All right. Moving into the artistic and aesthetic aspects, then, I think we understand that Hindu icons or murtis are not meant to be realistic images. I think we inherently understand that. Features like multiple arms or hybrid forms are symbolic ways of expressing, various things, such as power, protection, cosmic forces, and whatever have you. I mean,
Transcendentalism, there's so much to it.
exactly. I mean, Ravan did not really have 10 heads. It's just, there is a certain symbolism associated with it. So,
Exactly.
European viewers, on the other hand, were sort of more used to the realism expression
Mhm.
of, nature and things. They probably took these forms literally and tried to judge them, from that perspective. So I'm just wondering if, that aesthetic perspective or gap fully
Mhm.
explains the Western vision, or there is a deeper, as you earlier said, ideological motivation behind the mockery that they exercised.
I would say there is, yes, there is aesthetic gap. We are not denying that these people are not aware. They've never seen such images in their lives. They've never encountered such images in their lives. But I would also say these people are not unaware of abstractions or some kind of hybridity, because they're very happy interpreting Greek icons. Greek
Mm,
icons also have hybrid characters. Greek Greek images did have those. Then there are stories in Bible which also talk about such hybrid characters. So it's not like they are not aware of allegories, they are not aware of symbolism, or they cannot interpret. It seems like it becomes a tool of justification for justifying what they are actually doing.
mm,
That these people look what they are worshipping, so they need to be corrected. It becomes this righteous tool in the hands, this misinformation, this ignorance, that becomes a tool which is again reiterated through through all kinds of propaganda, where we see these images are seen as awe-inspiring, as
mm,
fascinating, but not true. They are
mm,
seen as representations, they are not seen as presences.
mm,
The images, or the divine images in Hinduism, they're not just images. We see them as presence of God. They are not representing anything, or they are not just merely energies of God. They are not merely indicative of a certain tendency or a certain divine will. What we are looking at is a very, very living presence. The temple becomes the abode or the home of the deity. The rituals are associated with the day to day functioning, the day to day life of the deity. So they
sure.
are very much. alive, but to discard them as something, they're stone images, and because they're unnatural, they have multiplicities. This multiplicity becomes um, it becomes a topic which causes a lot of anxiety. How can they have many hands? How can they have so many heads? But it is symbolic, and it is not merely indicative of one literal idea. It is not literal. The problem is they take it literally and they sort of run with it.
Hmm.
So I could agree Christian missionaries being unaware, not understanding, being ignorant, and thus trying to understand these images in their own terms. But I don't understand how it continues even
Hmm.
till much later. How these things, how Ganpati or Ganesh still is elephant god. If you've seen some of the episodes of The Simpsons,
Hmm.
it's a very popular show. You should see how Apu is presented. Anyways, I mean, I will not get into that. But there's an image of Ganesha right behind
Hmm.
Apu. And you should see the kind of interaction, the way he interacts with the deity is again very, very problematic. So I would not really say there's an aesthetic gap, definitely, but it is also a deliberate way to rob the Indian iconography or the Hindu iconography of its supremacy. See,
Sure.
once you start mocking something, you delegitimize it, you take away its power, you
Sure.
take away its superiority. You
Sure.
say it's not important. I mean, because it is funny looking, it is weird looking.
Sure. Sure. Thank you.
I,
You know,
I,
yeah. Sorry, Amitabhji, before I let you in, I just wanted to kind of, get back to the European appreciation for the Greek iconography. My observation is that yes, they do.
Mhm.
But they had to destroy it first. They had to destroy the
Yes.
civilization, put it in
Mhm.
the museums before they actually started liking it and appreciating it. So there is a certain destructive tendency, on display here. So
Mhm.
with that, let me turn it over to my friend
no,
Amitabh.
I wanted to go very specific, right? You mentioned Ganesha, but
Mhm.
most of the time it is Kali, goddess Kali, and Shiva who are very, very misrepresentative with their uh, they get the most of the fearful reaction. Like this goddess is with the skulls and blood dripping from her, and she's a killer, and they don't understand the background story of it. They just have a very hostility towards it, and then they look it through their uh, dualism of good versus evil, black and white, and
Mhm.
my question would be how did this insecurity shape their demonization by these colonial powers? And so if you can go more specifically for Shiva, Kali, that
Sure.
just like you talked about Ganesha, same thing.
Mhm.
Um,
Sure. So, I mean, yes, to understand this, again, demonization of particularly Shiva and Kali, let's understand who Shiva and Kali are. Again, the answer lies in how they look or their iconography, how they are conceived in Hindu imagination. So, Kali is an independent goddess. She has multiple qualities. She's not merely, one character at a time. She can be annihilatory at one time, and she can also be a mother at the same time. She has both of those qualities, but her annihilation is not malevolent. Similarly, she's also a fiercely independent icon. She's not docile, or she's not plain. She is somebody who is on the margins, who redefines feminine sexuality, who redefines the whole idea of being a woman. If we must understand, she's a very powerful feminine icon, Kali per se. And Shiva, similarly, don't forget Shiva's origins lie as an outcast. Shiva is a Janma, one who's not born. Shiva lies again on the margins or on the periphery. He is worshipped by people who would again be considered outcast. There are ways of worshipping both of these deities, which again to a Western understanding might seem very, very polluting, dirty. That's where these deep anxieties lie. Because Kali, remember in Western understanding, women who are even slightly independent are cast as shady characters,
Mm.
correct? They're not seen as powerful women. Whereas someone like Virgin Mary, who's docile, who's calm, who she becomes this idolized woman. Whereas Kali, somebody like Kali, who tramples her own husband, but again, that is not literal. That is something very, very deep. That has a very deeper meaning. And again, she lives on cremation grounds, and she has a lolling tongue. She wears dismembered a skirt made of dismembered hands or limbs and skull garland. Similarly, Shiva is an outcast smeared with ash, represents death. Similarly, Kali also represents cyclical time. So it is also the kind of ideas they evoke. Death is not seen as a problem in Hindu mythology. Death is also seen as a sacred phenomenon. We don't have a problem with death. We don't have a problem with the deceased or the whole idea of dying. Whereas in the West, how could gods be associated with death? How could gods kill? But the killing is not merely a violent act of going and killing somebody. It is again, it is a cyclical thing. It is something. It is cessation and it is also rebirth.
Mm.
So that is something they do not want to grapple with because it is in conflict with their own understanding of what a god means. They cannot simply take a woman like Kali to be a goddess. How can she be a goddess? She's nude. How can she be a goddess? She's trampling her husband. She is, yes, there is sexuality, but she is not a sexual being. Kali is not a sexual being. So the problem becomes when they try to label these gods and goddesses, and that's where this whole idea of being demonic, because goddesses can't be nude; they have to be fully covered. They are docile, they are nice, they are benevolent. I mean, Kali has all the qualities. She is benevolent, and she is equally. She's a wrathful deity also, but that wrath is a marker of her protective energy, protective quality.
True.
So that's where I feel all of this comes from, because it is again their own understanding, and it is again that shock of how can they be so liberating. See, these are models who are very liberating. Shiva is he can be a poster boy of liberation, but we don't want to term him like that because we have our own understanding of liberation.
Mm.
Okay, so that's where there's a clash, that we have our own understanding, so this doesn't fit.
Yeah, yeah. So it's actually interesting. There's clearly shades of, the different concepts of time. I mean, they have a linear concept of time. It starts somewhere, it ends somewhere, and then the judgment comes, and you get to where you get to. Whereas we
Hmm.
have this cyclic, view of time, where destruction has to be part of the cycle. Otherwise, renewal cannot take place.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, another observation I just want to make before I pose my next question is, it is not just the murtis that have been denigrated. Even our, Dharma granthas, take Mad Bhagavad Gita. We arrive at Mad Bhagavad Gita in the middle of a war. The war is about to start, and someone has, second thoughts about it.
Hmm.
And now Gita is talking about, your kartavya, your dharma, in the middle of this setting, and yet Gita has been termed as a book of violence, promoting war. So yeah, I think it's very much related to the viewpoint that you arrive at when you look at some of these different philosophies, that you're not
Mm.
familiar with. So let me just come to some of these Oriental scholars, who did some good work. I'm not going to put down everything that they did. They preserved some Sanskrit texts. They can did some translation, some good, some bad. It's not
Mhm.
always one or the other. But at the same time, I think we can be thankful to some of the things, contributions they made. But at the same time, they imposed categories like myth, idolatry,
Yeah.
superstition, and so on and so forth. So, how do you see that? How do you see their contribution to Hindu thought? These Indologists, whether it's Max Muller, or whether it's the whole German, the
Mm.
cabal of German Indologists, and so on and so forth. Just yeah. So, just your thoughts on that.
I do agree. Yes, you're right. They did they did contribute to the preservation of these important texts, and yes, translations were they took active role in translation. I would not deny that, but I would also say they are guilty of exoticizing these gods and goddesses, again, based on their own comfort and based on the agenda. So, for instance, I mean, becomes Upanishad is good, it is philosophical, but Purans are myths. So yes, you're right. So this whole idea of mythology, myth, what is myth and what is not myth, what is philosophy, becomes this constant labeling or categorization that these Orientalist scholars engaged in. I feel that did a great, that was actually one of the biggest disservice that could have happened to the whole plethora of Hindu gods and goddesses, because they were happy with the philosophies. They were happy with the Hindu thoughts, but they were very wary of these images.
Mhm.
They did not want to talk about the visual,
Mhm.
the how the philosophies when they manifest. We should not forget that these idols, these gods and goddesses, the way they appear, the way they are conceived, they are also manifestations of the same philosophies that you're sort of exalting, but then you're putting down these idols as imaginations. They are imaginations, they are not real, because again, they are not fulfilling certain criterias that you consider um, worth studying. So again, they were deemed decorative.
Mhm.
That
Mhm.
how can gods be so decorative? The sexualization was again termed as it is, they are overly sexualized. But again, there was no attempt to understand these phenomenon. Are these embellishments or the weapons that they are holding, are those only merely meant for violence, or are they indicating they symbolize something? Why wasn't abstraction understood in the way it should have been? So I felt again the Orientalist, um, uh, they helped they helped the colonizers in a big way. Sort of the understanding, the way Western understanding was shaped about Hindu gods and goddesses. There was a big role of these Orientalist scholars. Buddha becomes the poster boy. He's Buddha is nice, Shiva is not. Shiva is scary. Buddha is okay. So that's where I don't understand how. I mean, what was going on. So there was certainly a hesitation to engage with the images. Um, uh, and again, the lens through which these images were looked at, they seemed exotic, but because they were unnatural, they were hybrid. So they were imaginative. They were not real. They could not have an essence of real. Doing away with the rituals, the practices, the belief, the you know crores and crores of people believing in that. completely doing away with that. So,
That's I think is that time period of the 1900s where Europe erupted with the social racial hierarchies, and I think that's the model they applied. Is that what your thought on these is, that they're applying their lordships and plebs and that kind of thinking on our iconography?
yes, yes, absolutely. You see that those hierarchies being created. So even within the Hindu fold, there's lesser of an issue with a Vishnu because Vishnu sort of fulfills the European understanding of kingship. But Shiva sort of is again difficult to understand.
Mm, mm,
Why with that matted locks and the ash smearing, living on cremation grounds and haunting cremation grounds with goblins and ghouls? That is something which baffles them and which they are clearly very, very hesitant to address. So, and that then there are other Orientalist scholars who over exoticize it. Again, that is a problem.
sure.
Everything is mystified. Tantra becomes this tool to either to sort of exaggerate all these misconceptions and misunderstandings.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Um, I just wanted to come back to a point you made earlier. Some of these toxic words that were introduced into our lexicon. The mythology.
Mm. Mm.
Um, and of course, monkey god and elephant
Elephant
god
God.
and this, all those things. What is most unfortunate is that we, as Hindus,
Mhm.
continue to use some of those terminologies in our own daily conversation. I have seen some very prominent leaders, prominent people on,
Mhm.
in media, on television, so on and so forth, talking about, dharmic history, Puranic history of, Hindu Dharma as mythology, quote unquote. And I just don't know what to do about it, but it just
Mhm.
troubles me that and these are committed Hindus. These are not even secular Hindus. They're committed Hindus. If you consider something as a mythology, quote unquote myth, then
Mm.
why would you worship or be
Exactly.
the very essence of that particular belief system? So it just troubles me a great deal when we use words that we don't understand the meaning that they're impregnated with. Anyway, we live in a global consumer market, and you see Hindu symbols being constantly used in a very derogatory way on clothing, on shoes, merchandise, and especially yoga branding has just become completely out of control. What would you say about this cultural appropriation that the consumer industry has taken on? Is it merely ignorance, or is just you think it's a continuation of the colonial mindset?
I feel it is a continuation of colonial mindset. I mean, at this day and age, we can't be ignorant about these things. I mean, Google it. It is so easy. So you
Mm,
cannot say that I'm ignorant. It is that arrogant refusal to engage with a culture that yes, you're not aware of, but you are still attempting to appropriate it. I also feel the problem lies with the way they construe or they think of Hindu culture as something which they can just play with. They do not this see it as non-confrontational. They think these images have just come about because it's a very old history. It's and there's no agency to these images, and we can appropriate them, we can remix them the way we want to, because who's going to object? And
mm,
I feel that's what is happening when it comes to yoga, or when it comes to even popular culture like Halloween, clothing. So they are reducing that whole idea, the whole concept of a divine being into a mere motive. So the divine being becomes a motive because that's the only thing that they want to see. Oh my God, Krishna's blue color and Krishna, the character Krishna. I can only understand Krishna. I read it somewhere, it was in one of the magazines. The Playboy God. So that is something which I find fascinating. That is something I think, that is all that Krishna is. So I'll take away that idea, only the superficial bit or only the bit which is visible to me, which is very literal. But I will not get into the ontological or the philosophical understanding of Krishna. So, yes, Krishna becomes cool. And similarly with yoga also, the ethical discipline, the whole moral code that goes behind that is yoga. Yoga is not merely postures and breathing, and it is not merely something which is hip or cool and trendy. It is a system which has been devised over centuries, thousands and thousands of years.
Mm.
But this reductionist attitude to taking away or extracting, see, again, this is something which is a very colonizing mentality. I'll only extract. I find this cute. I find this interesting. This is fun. I'll extract it and I will use it. I will remix it. I'll change it. I will tweak it the way I want. This is, but I don't want to get into the depth of it. That is not fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, coming back to your point about Playboy God, um,
Mm,
there was I don't know if you read about it or not. There was a case in Poland against
mhm,
the I think there was an, ISKCON representative being taken to court for worshiping so-called Playboy God.
oh,
Um, and well, it ended well actually because the defense called it actually had come from from the church, and
mhm,
the defense lawyer called the nuns, and asked them to recite the oath they take when they become nuns, and they
mhm,
refused to do it because oath actually says, I'm going to be bride of the Christ.
mhm.
So, and the case was, of course, thrown out of court because, clearly it's all symbology as opposed to, anything actually behind it. So, but yeah, the hypocrisy is overwhelming sometimes.
Yes, it is
Yeah.
astounding.
So how should we engage, with the Western, powers that be, in terms of trying to have a respectful conversation, but at the same time,
Mhm.
standing for our values, standing for our symbology, standing for our iconography, and making sure that proper respect is conferred on these deep ideologies.
I feel we should begin with somewhere in the middle. You said, even devoted Hindus calling these things as myth. We need to come up with our own vocabulary. We can't use these Western terms. We need to first have our own vocabulary. We need to first understand our own gods and goddesses. We can't negotiate with
Yeah,
borrowed terms. That's what I feel for the first, for the, for starters. Then, yes, we must object to any misappropriation or any appropriation that happens. And see, these, artistic licenses, again, I'm not for banning something or forbidding anyone, but there has to be understanding, a complete understanding of the idea a certain image represents. And maybe it is time we need to say that these things are not meant to be remixed, they are not meant to be tweaked, they are not meant to be sometimes even depicted. They're not supposed to be reinterpreted because, like I said at the start, they are not representations. One can see them as representations. They are living embodiments.
Mm,
They
mm,
are living presences. So just merely looking at the image and appropriating it, we need to set that boundary. We also need to, this whole museumization of an image, where from an image it becomes merely an object, it becomes an antiquity.
sure.
That's also something we need to think about. You know, when these images are labeled in museums, what sort of labels are being created for them? Dancing Shiva is not equal to Nataraj. They are not the same thing. It is your understanding that Shiva is dancing. We are looking at a whole cosmic formation.
Sure, sure.
He is the Lord of the universe. We are seeing the Lord of the universe in action, literally being in action. But for you, it is dancing Shiva. So we need to rewrite these labels. Which is why, when you said at your alma mater, they are beginning these courses. So maybe we need to educate ourselves first. We need to come up with our own vocabulary. That's non-negotiable.
Thank you. So, very enlightening conversation, but I'm going to actually ask some out of syllabus questions if you don't mind.
Sure, sure.
It's a little bit different from the conversation we're having, but it's more about, are we civilizationally as a society, are we preparing ourselves? Do you see a change in the intellectual space for countering these false narratives? Do you see any sign of light in our intellectual space for doing that right now?
I am actually very hopeful and I'm optimistic because these processes have already begun. We are uh, raising our voices. We are correcting people when they are misrepresenting. So I do see a hope in the scholarly community. I do see a hope all around. I mean, like I told you, my biggest class size comes from an engineering batch, and I've been teaching, and that's where I see the most enthusiasm. And I'm very hopeful. Those kids whom I taught last year, they went to the Elephanta caves and they
Mm,
did a lot of work there. Now they
mm,
are
mm,
developing a website and they are coming up with all the awareness. And they are talking about Shiva, how Elephanta is not merely your regular cave temple. It is the abode of Shiva as construed by
mm.
the person who conceptualized Elephanta. So it is literally Kailash or Shiva as if he's literally living in Kailash. That's the idea behind Elephanta. So I do see a lot of hope. I do.
Okay, well, that's really, as we enter our sunset years, people like me and my generation, it's good to know that there are others sort of, coming behind us and, holding the torch, and hopefully we'll continue to, continue to work on these. Um, we have a bunch of questions in the QA box, so we'll get to them in a second. But one last question from me, and that is about the Hindu youth in India. We hear a lot of good things happening. The dharmic tourism is increasing. There are these bhajan clubs, coming up and things like that. I just want to understand, someone who is there on the ground
Mm-hmm.
interacting with the youth,
Mm-hmm.
students and so on and so forth. Do you see any green shoots, in the Gen Z and Gen Alpha or whatever have you, that gives us, room for optimism?
Yes, there is. There is. Yes, they again, Gen Z, they want to understand uh, Hindu culture, Hindu religion in their own terms. But I would again see, I have a lot of optimism. I see there is a lot of curiosity, which is always a good sign. asking questions, being curious, and wanting to learn. I see that as a big positive. Um, and as a teacher, that's all I can do. I can make them curious, I can make them interested. So yes, they are interested. It the way they are doing it could be slightly different. They may
Hmm.
not be reading books, but yes, they are wanting to be a part of this conversation. They do feel that these are things that we must be aware of at least. I mean, not everyone can be a knowledgeable person, but awareness is something, yes, they are.
Well, I'll take that as sign of progress. I'm definitely encouraged by it, in spite of my colleague shaking his head, maybe a little bit less optimistic than me. But any small, ray of hope actually is good. Amitabh, unless you have any burning question, I'm going to go over to the QA box.
I can read them from
Okay,
there, though,
go ahead.
and
Go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
have my opinion on these bhajan
That's
nights, which I
that's
that I'm not going to talk today. There is hope for Gen Z, and I think the onus of that is on us.
yeah.
If we don't invite them, they are curious, and we are
Yeah.
not feeding that curiosity or answering that. That's, I think, is on us more so than on them. That's a different topic, not for today. Um, One of the questions here, it's going back to the middle of the conversation we had, um, is do you agree that Shiva and Parvati have been sexualized in Tantra, New Age spiritualism? Um,
Yes, in the
and
Western
vice
understanding of Tantra, they have certainly been sexualized. And again, the understanding is very, very superficial. They are seen as merely a couple engaging in sex, but they do not understand the transcendentalism or the power that goes behind that sexuality. So, yes, uh, these reductionist categories, certainly Shiva and Parvati, and because of very, very poor understanding of Tantra, we do see that happening. Tantra is not only about sex, but again, it has been exoticized like anything. It is the most abused um, um, uh, of all religious forms or practices, So, yes, that has certainly happened.
That was question. Actually, I should mention that was one of the question from Charu Sharma ji. She's from Chandigarh, India. So I hope she got the answer. And
Okay, I think Rakiji is basically emphasizing the point I had made earlier about not using words like mythology
yeah,
when
Mhm.
talking about our gods and religion. Yeah, this is something that I think we've grown up on. This is in our books. This is the words like that are everywhere. But I think we need to start understanding what they really mean and how insulting they are, and we should learn to get away from them. Go ahead, Amitabh. You want to go to the next
yeah.
question?
So Atul Sharma ji is a more of a comment than a question,
Atul Shahji.
but yeah,
Yeah, yeah, Atul
huh?
Shahji. Yeah.
Atul Shah,
Atul.
sorry.
Mhm.
Atul Shahji. I mean, he says Western and Middle Eastern culture and religion systems are suffering from pseudo superiority complex and have delusional exclusive mentality for 2000 years. These ignorant scholars are just like frogs in a well. Merciful sages and rishis are just like magnificent elephant, and Western Middle Eastern scholar are small rats and nothing else. Their scriptural interpretation are disorganized, primitive, outdated, without hesitation. This is just a comment.
Yeah,
And he's just thanking you for excellent presentation, Mona Lisa ji.
Thank
Um,
you.
and then, and Charuji replied back, and she's also thanking you for understanding her concept.
Yeah, yeah. So just comment on other Shaji. I mean, I think without getting in, without insulting the scholars and all that, I think this superiority complex is well understood, and there's another thing. This there is actually a inherent insecurity actually
Yes.
that is that we haven't quite understood.
Hmm.
Um, if you look at the early 19th century, early 19th century, there was tremendous anxiety about who, what Western culture was all about. What were the roots of Western civilization?
Mhm.
This was particularly so in the Germanic, scholarship space. They were trying to define as to, what Germanic, you know, society and civilization was about, and they came across Mahabharata, and
Mhm.
all of a sudden they started seeing themselves as the heroes of Mahabharata, and they interpreted the whole thing as this was our story, and these people in India, they stole it, they changed it, and and the whole Aryan race theory and Aryan invasion theory actually emanated from that anxiety of trying to understand who the heck they were.
Yes.
So we talk about superiority complex and so on and so forth, but I think we have to also understand the inherent
Mhm.
inferiority complex that led to this overt expression of dominance and superiority. So
There's
like,
a question.
yeah, okay, go ahead.
There's a
Sorry.
question here from Milind Pavleji, and he's addressing you, Malisaji, again. Your thought that we must stop objectifying the images is absolutely good, but how does one even start to implement it, knowing that a lot of us have idols kept at home? I'll call them murtis kept at home as
Mhm.
decorations. Um, you know, um, what were your thought on that? B, how do we even begin to, what do we need to change in our um, um,
So
approach?
we need to first stop doing that. First, stop buying murtis as mere decoration or home decor. I mean, they cannot uh, serve that purpose. They are not meant to serve that purpose, which is why I said, and a constant engagement, a constant education is very, very important. We first need to educate ourselves. What do these gods mean? You can't have just these images decorating or beautifying your homes. We cannot have those things. Otherwise, what is the difference between us and those putting Buddha heads as decorations? So that we cannot. We need to first begin by stopping these practices, and we need to fully understand what that image means. For example, a Krishna from Mysore, or and then a Krishna from Belgavi, you would have very different images. Same character, but different images. There has to be a reason for it. We need to understand that. We need to understand, why do these gods look like this? If this god is particularly good looking, if this god has a very cute face, something, sometimes, Krishna, the baby images of Krishna get, you see a lot of those things happening around Krishna. So we need to understand that image first, the whole concept behind that image. So the onus is on us. We need to first start educating ourselves.
Yeah, I think some rudimentary understanding of the symbology and what things stand for and why we do what we do needs to be there, because at the very least we need to be able to communicate with our children, if nothing else.
Mhm.
And I have to be the first one to admit, during my youth and growing up years when we were raising family, I wasn't there. It was it's we absorb our dharmic practices, spiritual practices through osmosis. Living in a Hindu society, but we never actually learned to articulate the basic fundamental principles. And it only comes after the train has left the station sometimes, which is kind of not the right way to do it. You really can't outsource. You can't really outsource knowledge to others, or education to others. It has to come from come from you. Sorry to to sort of give you a tough homework, but this is our responsibility as we bring the next generation into this world. So so on that note, I think this is probably the last question in the QA box.
Yeah, but I do have an invitation for Dr. Bera. We have a program, an event that we do, a 2, 3 day conference. It's going to happen this year in October. You're coming to US, but if you can have a plan, we will send a formal invitation for coming to our Hindu Mandir Empowerment Conference that is held every year. This year is going to be in Los Angeles. I'm extending an invitation right now here, but we will send a formal invitation. And if you can accept that, we'll be very, honored. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
We would love to have you definitely interact with you in person. So I think on that note, I just like to thank you for sharing your thoughtful insights on this very important subject. I think understanding how these misrepresentations and misunderstandings came about gives us some ideas on how we can, you know, engage with the society at large and try to, undo some of the damage that's been done. Um, Partly misunderstanding, um, partly deliberately. But nevertheless, I think having these kind of conversations, particularly with experts like yourself, who's made, your career life mission to work on and talk about these things is very, very important. I like to thank you on behalf of my organization, my colleague Amitabh ji. I'd like to thank you for taking the time, sharing your knowledge and your thoughts with us, in spite of lateness of the hour. And of course, thank the audience for your patience, for spending the hour with us. We love to have you back on future conversations of this kind. On that note, namaste,
Thank
and
you so much.
all the very best to you in your academic endeavors and your conference in Chicago.